I had a few questions, but I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about what Ranking Member Rogers elicited from testimony. So let me just revisit that. Mr. Martina Diaz, from my understanding, when you were talking to the Ranking Member, you said that foreign assistance programs like the Green Climate Fund will actually not reduce, by itself, it will not reduce greenhouse emissions. It will do nothing to reduce climate change unless bigger polluters like China will also reduce their emissions. Is that correct?
What I meant to say, Congressman, is that we need China as part of the solution because they're almost 30% of global emissions. But we also need all the other countries that are smaller shares, but collectively represent the bulk of emissions. So we need everybody to do their part.
Right. But if China doesn't do anything, then what we do is pretty much for naught. Even if we continue to reduce our CO2 emissions, which we were doing before the pandemic, if China continues to pollute at a three times rate where we're polluting, all these efforts are for naught. And I'm not advocating that we do nothing. I just want to make sure we got our facts straight that without China's cooperation, we're going nowhere in this climate change battle, correct?
What I would say is that China's willingness and ability to move also depends on what others do. So as more and more, so China wants to be a world power, right? They want to be influential around the world. They want to have friends in many places, including their own region. However, many of those countries are the ones getting it directly from the impacts of climate change, and they're increasingly starting to realize that China is not doing enough, and that China is part of the problem, not the solution. And so, as we work with other countries to get them to be responsible to reduce their emissions, the pressure is building on China to do more. So these things are connected. It's not just a one stop shop there.
All right, so I'll take it that yes, we can't do anything globally unless China comes on board. And then to your own admission, you said that there are actually no enforcement mechanisms of the Paris Climate Accord regarding China, right? That there's zero enforcement mechanisms in that deal.
Well, we negotiated an agreement that partly because of our insistence as the United States relies heavily on voluntary commitments by all countries, including the U.S., right? And that
Right.
means that we do have to report. That is an obligation under the agreement. We all have to say what we're doing and how we're doing it. But a lot of the enforcement really depends on our ability to work together with others and to put pressure on others through example and through other means so that we can all achieve those targets.
Right. So we have no enforcement mechanisms. We just have basically well wishes and empty promises by the Chinese Communist Party. So for example, the Chinese Communist Party is not even saying that they'll reduce their emissions until what, 2060?
No, they've said that they will reach neutrality, that is to say, net zero emissions by 2060. They can't get there unless they start doing stuff today, because it's a long curve that you need to bend, and so they would need to start now, and that's why we're taking them. Every time they make those kinds of commitments, we immediately jump and say, okay, well, show us how you're going to do it. What are the midterm targets that you are trying to put in place? Show us the plan. Otherwise, we can't take this seriously.
So then am I missing something? Have they started to reduce their emissions? Because you sound very optimistic. I mean, how much have they reduced in the last 5 years?
All I'm saying is that we're in order to get to their own commitment of 2016 at zero, they need to start now. So we're asking them, please show us what is your plan, and we keep asking questions about how they're going to do it. At the same time, we're pushing them hard not to just stop at 2016 net zero. We would like them to do it a lot earlier. In the U.S., we've announced a target of net zero by 2050. So we would like China to be at least at that level.
But you're aware that they're greatly increasing their CO2 emissions, right? I mean, you realize that what you're saying is a fantasy, that they're not only are they not reducing their CO2 emissions, that while they're giving you these pie in the sky dreams, they're actually increasing their CO2 emissions. Like you know that, right?
Well, the key is they continue to grow in terms of emissions, but they're beginning to put in place a set of policies that will help bend the curve over time. For example, they've announced a major cap and trade system, which is now being put in place in China, right? Slowly. It's a
Right.
oil tanker. You can't turn that around overnight. But we want.
So just to get this straight, Beijing is promising to reduce their emissions. At the same time, they're increasing their emissions, but they're telling the Biden administration that they are going to make their best efforts to reduce and go to zero by 2060. and the Biden administration is buying that nonsense. It seems to me that Beijing is playing Biden like an absolute fiddle here. And the fact that you are telling me with a straight face, do you believe this? I don't know if it's laughable. I don't know if I should, if it goes to your competence, but any rational person listening to this is not believing what you're saying.
Look, Congressman, we don't take what China tells us at face value on any issue. Right? We always have a very clear process for verifying. We push them in every negotiation, in every table, to show us the plan to have accountability. We're putting in place systems that are increasingly better at telling us who is emitting what. So it's not just about taking people at their word. So no, we're not trusting anybody in this game. We want an accountable system with transparency. But what I'm saying is that China is beginning to change its perspectives, and we have to take them. We have to accept that they're willing to do that, but then ask for the transparency and the accountability while we put pressure on them through other means, through other alliances, and through other parties.